Haven't uploaded a film for a little while because I had a bit of a break. I went up to visit my parents and then quickly to Auckland, not for very long, and when I got back, we've got a lot of stuff going on at work at the moment, which takes up a lot of my time, and I've just been working on little bits and pieces. I'm still doing the metal work on the body. I'm not going to keep showing that over and over and over again because there's not really much to see. It's taking me a while just to get the hang of how to do it and get the panels how I need them. A lot of people keep commenting, you know, oh, you should watch this video and watch that video and watch some other video. That'll show you the very basics. Other than that, the only way you can learn how to do the wheeling is to do it, as far as I can tell. I don't think someone can tell you how to do it. You just have to practice. So that's what I'm doing. I'm getting better. And in the meantime, I've been looking at how I'm going to do the wiring in the Riley, because I can actually start doing the wiring loom now. And I did find this. This is an original wiring diagram for a 1927 rather, Riley 9. The FT34 is my little switch panel thing. So I've been trying to get my head around how this works. I'm also going to use a slightly out of period, but still old car RB106 regulator, which was what they used in cars, I think from the 50s onwards, 50s, 60s. And they're very common, they're well understood, they work well. Originally, the Riley wouldn't have had any sort of regulator at all, just had a cutout, which these days is a sure way to cook your battery. So I need some sort of regulator in there. And I think I've figured out how I can wire it all up. But I was looking at this Rotax switch, and the switch itself has 4 positions. There's off, charge, side lights and tail light, and headlamps, or rather all lamps. And the way that should work is when you go to the all lamps position, all of the lights should be on. Obviously, that's what it's called. And that wasn't happening on my little switch panel. I was trying to figure out why, and it turns out that somebody has modified this. So this is the switch barrel with the contacts, and what's happening is this basically goes in there. This contact goes to the side lights, this one goes to the all lights, and so this little brass contact, when you're in that position, goes to the side, and when you go to there, it only goes to the all lamps position. So normally what you would do is you would wire the side lights and the tail light into the side light switch and the headlamps into the all lamps position, and this little brass contact should bridge both of those when it's in that position. And it turns out somebody has modified this. I'm not sure if we can really see it. The light here is not great, but this has been mangled. It's probably the best way to put it. So somebody has cut off the brass tab from around here. You can actually see the marks where they've cut it. So this should be longer. So what I'm going to do is see if I can repair that. There is kind of a brass screw there. Maybe I can get that out, and I can make a new little brass contact in there. And then that'll give me the working switch positions I need. I am going to fit fuses and relays. So I've ordered it is a modern sort of fuse box. I believe it has 9 fuses and positions for 4 relays. This is all going to be hidden, so you won't see any of this. The regulator I may put in the engine bay on the firewall. It just depends how the wiring works. But I'm going to have, I need relays to control the high and low beam on the headlamps. Originally the headlamps I have would have had normal beam and then dipped beam. And what the dipped beam would do is turn off one of the lamps, the offside lamp, I believe, and the near side lamp has a solenoid in it, and it would physically move the reflector to dip the headlamp. I don't think that would be legal here in New Zealand. Even if it is, it would confuse the hell out of everyone. So I've got LED bulbs for this, and I'm just going to have standard low beam and high beam. And speaking of the headlamp reflectors, I have sent those off for resilvering. There is a company up in Auckland called Progressive Electroplaters, I believe, and I think they are the only people now who can actually do that in the country. So I've sent those away to them. I think it'll be about $300, $350 per reflector, so it's not cheap, but it's the only way to get decent working lamps, I believe. I will have fuses for most things, and the relay for high-low beam and for the horn, mainly because the horn on the Riley, the button is in the middle of the steering wheel, so there's a cable that runs all the way up the steering column, and I don't want to run high current through that, so I will use a relay and a fuse for the horn. I will fuse the lamps. There's often debate around whether or not you should do that as well. Some people think it gives you another point of failure and your headlamps could go out if the fuse blows, but the fuse is there to protect the wiring in case anything shorts out. You don't want the wiring overheating and catching fire. So I think fuses are a good idea. I will fuse the probably the indicators, the side lamp and tail lamp, the horn, the fuel pump. There's a fuse for the dynamo, of course, for the field windings, and then I'll have a separate fuse for left and right headlamps. That way it gives you a little bit of redundancy. If one fuse blows, you've still got the other lamps, one side of the lamps working. And I think I've sort of scribbled out the wiring diagram. I think I know how to do it with the regulator box. Originally, as I mentioned, this car wouldn't have had any sort of regulator. It just had a cutout, and what the cutout does is disconnects the battery from the dynamo until the dynamo is producing enough voltage to not be turned by the battery. Otherwise, if you hook the dynamo to the dynamo will spin like a motor. So the cutout is there to wait until the dynamo voltage is high enough that the battery isn't going to try and spin the dynamo will start charging the battery. So I think what I need to do is take this apart. I did also go through my stack of voltage regulators. This one needed a little bit of fiddling. I had to adjust it all to get it to work correctly. The other good thing about these is when they're adjusted properly, the voltage that comes out of them is about 16 volts, 15 or 16 volts. That's what they're actually set to from the factory. And that's good with modern calcium batteries, which you need a higher voltage to be able to fully charge. So I'm pretty sure this should be able to charge the battery in the car. They need up to that 16 volts to get a full charge. And because I'm running LED lamps, the actual current draw should be pretty small. The only things I've got drawing current will be the lamps and the fuel pump. That's basically it. There's no ignition because it's a magneto ignition car. So I'm going to see if I can fix this. Yeah, now it's apart. I can definitely see where it's been modified. This tab should be bigger, and then the switch will work the way I believe it should work. I've made up a new brass contact. This is the old one. I'm not sure if that's original and it's been messed with, or if somebody made that. Yeah, kind of looks to me like somebody made it, I think. So I made up a new one. This little screw is pretty stripped, the thread, but I managed to get that done up and reasonably tight, and there's a bit of Loctite on it, so I don't think that'll go anywhere. I just made up the little brass contact. I sort of hammered it around a socket to get the curved shape, a socket the same diameter as the switch, and I sort of sanded the edges there just to make those smooth so that the little springy contacts will be able to go past it. I may end up putting a little bit of glue under this, I think. I'm not sure. Just worried it's going to move. But I've tested that out. That should work pretty well. You can see the 4 springy contacts here. These 2 are for the dynamo field coils, and this is for the lights, these bottom 2. And there's a metal contact that this all runs on, and that goes to what's the A terminal basically on this the switch panel. The A is effectively the battery positive, so that goes to the battery via the ammeter. Yeah, I might put a little drop of glue under that just to help hold it in place, but I think that should work fairly well. That sort of then fits down in there, and you can sort of see how the contacts work. So when both sets of lights are on, that little brass contact bridges both, and then that would be side lights, and then that's off. So pretty straightforward. These things are all old and mechanical, so relatively easy to fix, which is good. Have this all back together, and it seems to be working. This is one of my plastic replica front panels, but you can see there the different settings. There's charge on and off, or off, on, side and tail, all lamps. My multimeter just turned off. So this is with the switch in the off position, and there's no connectivity between any of these terminals. This terminal is the A terminal, so this goes to the battery via the ammeter, and when we switch to the first position, this is the charge on position, it shorts out these 2 contacts, and normally this contact goes to the dynamo output. That dynamo output then goes to the cutout, which then comes back to the A terminal. This contact goes to the field for the dynamo, so the dynamo won't charge unless the field's energized. So that's what that charge switch does. And then these 2 are connected now, whatever the rest of the positions for the switch. So I think what I can do is, to get this to behave the same as in an original car, I will wire the field winding. It'll go through the regulator, which will regulate the field, but it'll go through this to switch it on and off. So if the switch is in the off position, it won't charge. So that should be just the same as normal. If you then go to the side light position, you will see that it's a bit hard to do with one hand, but the A terminal connects to the side terminal, but not to the headlamp terminal. The field is still connected, of course. And then if you go to the all lamps position, which is there, we should now have, it's worse than using chopsticks, the side lamps connected and the headlamps, and of course the field is still there. So I think that'll work. That seems to have fixed it. I just put a little drop of super glue on that brass contact just to make sure it doesn't move, and Loctite on the screw, but I don't think it can really come out. I've been using this electrical clean and lube. That's what I've been spraying everything with, and since I had it all apart, I used a little brass brush on the Dremel just to clean up all the springy contacts. So I think I can put this back together again now. And then I think I've got a pretty good idea of how I want the wiring to look. I don't know what color wires they used on these late 20s, early 30s cars. I'm not sure they actually did use colored wires back then. I think they may have just been a single color. I'm going to use, I've actually got trailer wire. I managed to get a whole bunch of it cheap. It comes as 7 or 9 connector wire, I believe. It's rated for quite decent current, and I'm going to use that to do the wiring loom, and I'm going to wrap the loom in it's a high quality cloth type tape. It's what I used on my Austin 7. It looks pretty good. It's all just black, but the wiring in this car is going to be so simple, you don't really need the color coding. It should be fairly obvious what's going where. But I'll reassemble this and check it all still works, and then I can put it back in the car. The annoying thing about this is you have to kind of half take it apart to get it in and out of the instrument panel. You have to take the knobs and things off. This bolts into the instrument panel. There's countersunk screws that go in here, so you have to take the front panel off to get to the screws that hold the body in place. Just makes it a little bit awkward. But yeah, this should go back together pretty easily. Not sure yet where I'm going to mount things, but I suspect the regulator will go somewhere like that, so I can have a hole through the firewall with a grommet for all the cabling that needs to go inside the car and down to the rear of the car. But it means it'll be easy for me to get to things like the starter solenoid to pick up the 12 volts. The dynamo wiring will have to run under there somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where it goes on an original car, but the dynamo's right at the front there, so the cables come out from under there. And then I'll have to figure out how I do the wiring to the horn, which mounts down here on this bar, and the headlamps, and the side lamps and indicators will be up here. The other thing I need to do is a brake light switch. I do have the switch in place. It's underneath that panel, so there'll be another wire there that'll have to run back to the stop lamps. They'll be down here somewhere. And because I can lift the body off but leave the instrument panel in place and the firewall in place, I think I can do all of the wiring so that you can actually take the body off without affecting the wiring. That's going to be my aim. Speaking of the body, this is where I'm up to on that. I'm still tweaking it, getting the shape right. I do have one place I need to re-weld where the weld is cracked. Can't even see where it is. It's in there. Where I don't think I had very good penetration on that piece of the weld, so I need to weld that up. And the other thing I decided is the strip that goes along the side. I think I'm going to do that as a separate piece. It does mean there will be a little join, a little gap here, but by the time the door is on there, because you've got the door there, I don't think you'll notice really that there's a little break in the metal. I'm just worried that if I try to weld a long thin strip on there, one, it's going to break. Two, if this changes position when I'm folding it over the edges, that could move. So I think that'll just be a little separate covering strip. And that's where I'm up to with all of that. Today I've been looking a bit more at the wiring, and I went back through a whole load of Riley bulletins. These go back to the 50s, trying to find out what the original color schemes would have been for the wiring. And as far as I can tell from what I've read in there and other places, is originally it was all armored cable, but this was really early on in the 20s, late 20s, where there wasn't much in terms of wiring in the car. Then apparently there was a period where there wasn't really any sort of color coding, but then later on they started using the Lucas color codes, and they're fairly standard. Even cars like the MG 50s, 60s, 40s even, I think, all followed those basic codes where different colors mean different things, and you start getting the wires with the stripes in them to mean other more specific details. So a good example of that is the headlamp wiring is blue, and then there's different color stripes depending on if it's the high beam or the dip beam. So red stripe for dip, white stripe for high. and so on. So I may be able to get, or I know I can get, the correct fabric cable. The only problem is I have to get it from the UK, so it's going to be expensive, but I think it might be worth it. I need to figure out exactly how much I need. It's always way more than you think, because even though the car's only, 12, 13 feet long, by the time you've actually run the cables so that they nicely follow down the chassis, follow to the back of the body and across to where the lamps and things are, it takes a lot more than you think. So, for example, to run a wire sort of from here down to the back where the lamps will go, it's about 3 meters. That's for one cable. So I'm pretty sure now I know all of the circuits I need, and I can start actually laying it out, figuring out where I'm going to run everything. And I'm pretty sure the cabling to the back is going to run down this side of the car, which is where the battery cable goes. It'll just be attached to that, basically. Follow along there. It can tuck in behind it. So there will be 4 wires to the back. Left and right indicator, 5. Left and right indicator, side and number plate lamp, and stop lamp, and a ground. May just run all of the grounds to the chassis rather than running a wire all the way back there. That should be fine as long as I have nice clean points to attach them. And then there's wiring at the front, of course. The body I haven't done anything on today. I really need to get out the welding gear so I can weld up that crack. But as I say, it's just practice. My wheels work a lot better now that I actually filed the flats so they were flat. I think I mentioned before, as I got these, if you looked at them from the side profile, instead of going round, flat, and then down, they went round, and then there was a little dip in the middle. And that's one of the reasons I was struggling, because I was getting tram tracks, basically. I find I still need quite high pressure to really get shape from it, but it's getting better. I'm getting a better feel for it. This morning I went out and went to Southwards. I had to renew my annual pass. So I was having a look around there, and I was looking at the pre-war cars and some of the other older cars very closely to see how good the finish on them is. And when you actually look really, really closely, you see all sorts of problems with them. Things aren't symmetrical. You can see all the dents and things. You can see all the sanding marks in the metal under the paint. There was an E-type Jag there, and if you know where to look, you can see where the panels are welded together. Yeah, it's quite interesting. But it's only when you look very critically that you notice all of that. So I think I just have to not fall in the trap of trying to get it too perfect, because I'll never get there. Once it's on the car and the car is a complete whole thing and it's painted, most people aren't going to notice. So I've been ignoring the Riley bodywork, but I have been doing the Velocette, because I'm getting annoyed that this thing is getting surface rust again. I'm going to need to clean all of that off. I've had another go at taking the oil canning out of it. So I tried this previously with heat shrinking, but the technique I was using then was to heat the panel and then quench it. So you get a little cherry red spot and then quench it with water. Apparently that's one of the ways you could do it. I wasn't having too much luck with that. So I've tried the other technique, or another technique, there's probably loads of them. And with this one, you actually heat up a spot and then you hammer and dolly it. And what you do is you hammer around the spot, sort of hammering it into the middle, and then hammer it down on itself. And you're really shrinking the metal down into itself. And that's worked way better for me. I've managed to get rid of all of the oil canning that I had in the sides. I've managed to get all of the oil canning out of the top here. One of the things I looked at Southwards today was what this looked like on the bike they've got there. The bike there is a Bitzer, similar to this, I guess. But it was good to see that this is pretty much flat across there. I do still need to sort of planish this out, but at least there's no oil canning in it now, which is good. Down the sides here, a little bit at the front. So I'm going to sand this back. I'll have to oil it all up because otherwise this will rust. As soon as you heat up steel, if you just leave it, the bits you've heated will rust almost instantly. You can see this is getting surface rust on it. That's not too bad. That'll come off with some phosphoric acid. But this is getting close to the point where I can start painting things. And of course, I still need to do my big order to Buller's End, the club, to figure out how I'm going to rebuild this engine. I definitely need new barrels, or at least I'd have to get these sleeved. I'm not sure where you can do that in New Zealand. So I'll build up a big list of everything I think I need and then talk to the club and see what they recommend. This doesn't need to be a new bike, so they have a lot of second-hand parts that will work. I'm quite happy to use those. But I'm going to go over this with the sander just to smooth it out a bit and probably do a little bit more planishing. But this body now is almost done. It's as good as I can get it, given it was all hacked around. So I think it should be fine. I think I'm nearly as far as I can go with this Velocette body. Done a bit more cleaning up on the little patch panels I welded in. I've definitely got the top piece a lot nicer. It's far more flat across there now. It's still a bit wavy and wobbly, but that'll be fine. I do have another plate of steel inside here. This seems to be a weak point on them. So I've got a piece of steel inside there, just held with these bolts, just to reinforce all of that. There is still a tiny bit of oil canning in some places on the sides here. I've got the sides fairly flat again, but once this is all bolted back into the frame, it's going to lock all of this in place. I think that'll go away. Same on this side. Got it all smoothed off. I will have to treat all the rust on it, clean it all up, go over the whole thing with the random orbit sander again, and we'll need a little bit of filler to fill in some of these little marks around the welds. The problem there is I can't get behind it because it's double skinned, so it's really hard for me to get in behind there to be able to planish it out properly. Up here was all completely hammered before I even got it, but I'm pleased with how this has come out now. It looks right. That's about the angle it sits at. You can see this is the little rear seat passenger seat, I guess, or this is also where the little pannier bags hang off the side. I'll have to see what I can get for those. So this is probably fairly close to paint. A couple of other things I did. This is the shelf that my Meccano Brooklands is going to sit on. You can see it's on an angle. And what I'm going to do is kind of like the same way you make a diorama. And I found a channel, if I remember I'll put the link to it, that shows how to make very realistic looking broken concrete for models. And what he uses is a mix of plaster and sand, and then he uses this, it's called tulle fabric. It's kind of woven mesh fabric. They use it for bridal veils. I got this from a $2 shop from a dress-up costume tutu, of all things. That was the cheapest way I could find to buy it, so I just bought that and chopped it up. This is EVA foam, and I'm going to use this to make a form. And you basically treat it like real concrete. You pour some of the mixture in, you settle this down into the middle of it, and it provides a kind of reinforcing mesh. And then what you can do is, once the plaster is dried and you've pulled the sort of panels out, you can crack them. You push them, put them over something like a stick or something round like an aerosol can, and you can break it. but it won't all fall apart because it's got the material in it holding it together. And that gives you a realistic looking broken concrete effect. And seeing as I'm trying to do Brooklands, that seems an appropriate finish. 3 panels. This is about the scale width of what the concrete was laid at Brooklands. Apparently it was unreinforced concrete, which is why it kind of settled in strange ways. I think it was probably one of the early mass uses of concrete. And what else? A few other small bits and pieces. I did get this clock on TradeMe just before I went away. Nobody else bid on it. I think it was $20. And I did get the clock mechanism working. I cleaned it all up, got it to work. But the problem is it doesn't... I don't think the spring runs all the way down. So it's a bit loose in the housing, obviously. It does keep good time, but it only runs for about 12 hours or so. But it's not running now. Here we go. But it's useful. If I'm out here, I can set it and use it as a kind of timer. And I also started working on the Meccano gramophone. I managed to get this, which is an original sound box. So again, off TradeMe, and I'm going to use that. This is the box for it. Number 5A sound box, nickel plated. I was originally thinking of doing a clockwork gramophone, but I realized that the clockwork motors won't run long enough, and the gearing down of it could be a little bit of a problem to get the right 78 RPM. So I thought I'll look for a Meccano electric motor, because I can build a speed controller for it and get accurate speed, relatively accurate speed. And they tend to be fairly expensive, but I looked on TradeMe. Again, TradeMe is our New Zealand equivalent of eBay. eBay never really took off in New Zealand, so we have a different local site, TradeMe, which is its own thing, very similar though. And searched on there. The annoying thing with that site is it tries to be clever when you search on things. So if I search for Meccano, it defaults to toys. And I'd rather it search everything and then lets me filter down, rather than trying to be clever and guessing what I'm actually talking about. So I did a search on everything, and I found another set of Meccano. I seem to have good luck with this. For, I can't remember how much it was. I think it was $80, including the postage. And that includes what I hope are a couple of Meccano electric motors. I think a couple of clockwork motors as well. But it was listed in the wrong category. It was under bulk beauty products for some reason, which is probably why nobody else had noticed it. So I snapped that up. So hopefully that will arrive tomorrow. And then I will look at, I'm going to make a wooden platter. I think I do need a decent amount of mass for the turntable part. It goes that way. And I will cut that out, maybe from a nice piece of oak or something like that. And I'll use the router to get it circular and use that. But the rest of it I should be able to make from Meccano, I'm hoping. This is all just loosely kind of mocked up to see how that will go. Probably make the sides like that. This is a 78. They're a little bit smaller than the 33s. And that'll sit on there. And we'll see how that goes. And I think that's everything. Once again, I didn't actually get to cataloguing the parts I need. So that'll be the next job.